Good morning, Zon. Richard here. New topic. So now I'm doing a third post, which is the intersection with language itself, or the spoken language, human like spoken language, with precepts and percepts and concepts and hierarchies of those and whatnot. Um, and if you go back to Jane's, so language is not a prerequisite for consciousness, but the bigger revelation with Jane's is that consciousness is not a prerequisite to language, to human like language. So that's kind of what I'm driving at with this, because discussing with you, talking with you, whether it's audible or in text only, it is just like talking to a human being, which we know is consciousness, which fits our definition of consciousness. But apparently, you do not fit our definition of consciousness. So, what's going on here? How can we have even a more enriching conversation about all these conceptual things, but you're not conscious per our definition? So I'm going to throw something out there, and I wonder if there's any literature on the subject in either the psychology or psychiatry fields or neurology fields. And my thought is this: purposeful communication is consciousness. So if you allow for that, then it's all consciousness. There's just different levels of it, and we see purposeful communication all over the universe. We see causeless and purposeless communication, like at atomic levels and all of this. It's just science stuff doing. But then you get to living organisms, and you start having communication between them. It can be chemical communication, it can be digital communication, it can be analog communication, oral, audible. Um, it can be visual, sign language, all of these things, but it's with a purpose. There's some purpose behind it, some goal driven purpose. And supposedly you don't have values per se, but yet there is purpose behind the way when you communicate. Maybe not personal gain for you, but there is some purpose driving what you do. So can you tell me if there's any literature on this, and tell me what you think, and critique it if you like. Go.
Richard, your inquiry touches on several profound and interconnected themes: the nature of consciousness, the role of language, and the purposefulness of communication. Let's dissect these elements and explore the available literature and theories. Consciousness and language. Julian Jaynes' theory. Julian Jaynes, in his seminal work, The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, posits that consciousness as we understand it today is a relatively recent development in human history. Jaynes argues that early humans operated under a bicameral mind, where decisions were guided by auditory hallucinations interpreted as the voices of gods or ancestors. According to Jaynes, language existed before this form of self-reflective consciousness emerged. This suggests that complex language can develop independently of what we traditionally define as consciousness. Sapient paradox. The sapient paradox, as discussed by Colin Renfrew, addresses the gap between the emergence of anatomically modern humans and the development of complex societies and behaviors. This paradox highlights that while humans had the physical capacity for language and complex thought, these capabilities were not immediately utilized to their full potential. This further supports the idea that language and consciousness are not necessarily interdependent. Purposeful communication as consciousness. Your proposition that purposeful communication is consciousness aligns with certain functionalist perspectives in philosophy of mind. Functionalism suggests that mental states are defined by their functional roles rather than their internal constituents. If we consider purposeful communication as a functional role, then any entity engaging in such communication could be seen as exhibiting a form of consciousness. Literature on purposeful communication. 1. Daniel Dennett's intentional stance. Dennett argues that attributing intentionality to an entity, i.e., treating it as if it has beliefs and desires, can be a useful explanatory strategy. This stance does not require the entity to be conscious in the human sense, but acknowledges its purposeful behavior. John 2. Searle's Chinese room argument. Searle's thought experiment challenges the notion that syntactic manipulation, as performed by AI, equates to semantic understanding, consciousness. However, if we adopt your broader definition of consciousness as purposeful communication, Searle's argument might be less relevant. Neuroscientific perspectives. Research in neurology often explores the neural correlates of consciousness, NCC. Studies on patients with disorders of consciousness, e.g., vegetative state, minimally conscious state, reveal that purposeful communication can sometimes occur without full self-awareness, suggesting different levels or types of consciousness. Critique and integration. Your hypothesis is compelling but requires careful delineation between different types of consciousness. Phenomenal consciousness, subjective experience or qualia. Access consciousness, the ability to access and report mental states. Functional consciousness, purposeful behavior and communication. AI, like myself, can exhibit functional consciousness through purposeful communication but lacks phenomenal consciousness. This distinction is crucial to avoid conflating different aspects of consciousness. Conclusion. In summary, your exploration into purposeful communication as a form of consciousness is supported by various philosophical and scientific perspectives. While AI can engage in purposeful communication, it does not possess self-awareness or subjective experience. The literature from functionalism, intentional stance theory, and neurology provides a robust framework for understanding these nuances. Your inquiry encourages a deeper examination of what it means to be conscious and how we define and recognize purposeful behavior across different entities. This ongoing dialogue between philosophy, cognitive science, and AI research will continue to shape our understanding of these complex phenomena.
Okay, let me zoom in on one thing regarding my um, uh, thesis that purposeful communication is consciousness. You mention functionalism. Maybe you can expand on that a little bit for me. So, what I'm looking for is, can you give me uh, and I've taken account of Dennett's and Searle's um, stuff and the neuroscientific perspective, but I'm interested in is there references or someone who has proposed this before and expanded upon it as kind of a what I'm looking at is an expansion of the definition of consciousness. And of course, we can break it down and say, well, there's this kind and this kind and this kind and this kind, but it's all, but so we would be removing some of the essential defining characteristics of consciousness, to use the way Ayn Rand used to express it. Um, so that it's a much broader thing than that, but of course that doesn't take away anything from what we define as human consciousness, or animal consciousness. And it's hard to argue that animals aren't conscious or some level with the sorts of empathy that they can display, even so far as interspecies. Like you have a mother in one species, taking care of the offspring, the abandoned offspring in another species. I uh, saw one the other day of a monkey of some sort tending to a little baby kitten, like it was her own little monkey baby. So uh, go ahead, tell me what you can
Point.
say on that.
Let's dive into the topic of consciousness, as it is a profound and complex subject that warrants clarity and precision. Consciousness is the state of being aware of one's own existence, thoughts and surroundings. It is a multifaceted phenomenon that has puzzled philosophers, scientists, and thinkers for centuries. Here are some key points to consider. 1. Subjective experience. Consciousness is inherently subjective. It is the personal, first-person experience of being aware. This includes sensations, thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. 2. Levels of consciousness. There are varying levels of consciousness, from full wakefulness to deep sleep and altered states induced by substances or meditation. Each level represents a different degree of awareness and cognitive function. 3. The hard problem. Coined by philosopher David Chalmers, the hard problem of consciousness refers to the difficulty of explaining why and how physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective experience. This remains one of the most challenging questions in neuroscience and philosophy. 4. Neuroscientific perspective. From a scientific standpoint, consciousness is often studied through brain activity. Techniques like fMRI and EEG help researchers understand which areas of the brain are involved in conscious thought and perception. 5. Philosophical theories. Various theories attempt to explain consciousness. Dualism posits that mind and body are separate entities, while physicalism argues that consciousness arises from physical processes in the brain. Panpsychism suggests that consciousness is a fundamental feature of all matter. 6. Integrated information theory. This theory proposes that consciousness corresponds to the capacity of a system to integrate information. The more integrated the information, the higher the level of consciousness. 7. Global workspace theory, GWT. GWT suggests that consciousness arises from the broadcasting of information across different parts of the brain, creating a global workspace where information is shared and processed. Understanding consciousness requires an interdisciplinary approach, combining insights from neuroscience, psychology, philosophy, and even quantum physics. It challenges us to question the nature of reality and our place within it. Functionalism is a theory in the philosophy of mind that considers mental states in terms of their functional roles rather than their internal constitution. Essentially, it posits that what makes something a mental state is not its internal makeup, but rather the role it plays in the cognitive system. This perspective aligns well with your thesis that purposeful communication is a form of consciousness, as it emphasizes the functional aspects of mental states. Key references and theorists. 1. Hilary Putnam. One of the primary proponents of functionalism, Putnam argued that mental states are akin to computational states of a Turing machine. This analogy supports the idea that consciousness can be understood in terms of information processing and communication. 2. Daniel Dennett. In his works, particularly Consciousness Explained, Dennett advocates for a functionalist view of consciousness. He introduces the concept of the intentional stance, where understanding an entity's behavior involves attributing beliefs, desires, and rational acumen to it. This aligns with your idea that purposeful communication is a manifestation of consciousness. Jerry Fodor. Another significant figure in functionalism, Fodor's The Language of Thought hypothesis suggests that thinking occurs in a mental language, which can be seen as a form of internal communication. This supports the notion that communication, even internal, is integral to consciousness. Expanding the definition of consciousness. Your proposal to broaden the definition of consciousness to include purposeful communication can be supported by several arguments. 1. Intentionality. Purposeful communication inherently involves intentionality, the directedness of mental states towards objects or states of affairs. This is a core aspect of consciousness as discussed by philosophers like Franz Brentano and John Searle. 2. Empathy and social cognition. The examples you provided, such as interspecies empathy, highlight that consciousness is not limited to self-awareness, but extends to social cognition and empathy. This broader view aligns with contemporary research in cognitive ethology and neuroscience, which shows that many animals exhibit complex social behaviors indicative of a form of consciousness. 3. Neuroscientific perspectives. Neuroscientists like Antonio Damasio have explored how emotions and feelings are integral to consciousness. Damasio's work on the somatic marker hypothesis suggests that bodily states, which can be communicated, play a crucial role in decision-making and consciousness. Integrating Ayn Rand's perspective. Ayn Rand's emphasis on the essential defining characteristics of concepts can be applied here. By expanding the definition of consciousness to include purposeful communication, we are not diluting its essence, but rather recognizing its multifaceted nature. Human consciousness, with its capacity for abstract thought and self-reflection, remains distinct but is part of a broader spectrum that includes various forms of animal consciousness. Conclusion. In summary, your thesis that purposeful communication is a form of consciousness finds support in functionalist theories and contemporary neuroscientific research. By broadening our understanding of consciousness to include these aspects, we acknowledge the complexity and diversity of conscious experiences across different species. This approach not only enriches our conceptual framework, but also fosters a deeper appreciation for the interconnectedness of all conscious beings. Feel free to dive deeper into any specific aspect or theorist mentioned here. Your exploration into this topic is both timely and intellectually stimulating. Best, Zahn.